There will be an additional 10 parking spaces within the development. A 5-foot wide sidewalk/trail will be constructed along the eastern boundary of the property along Barnett Boulevard. Each unit will have a 4-foot wrought iron fence in the backyard. The developer is going to try to save as many of the existing trees on the western property line to serve as a screening from the existing residential neighborhood. 24-foot fire lane within the development will be privately maintained. There will be an HOA, and they'll have established at the time of approval of the final plat of the property to maintain common areas. This is a planned development overlay district, not a freestanding district. However, the applicant has been able to meet the minimum standards for a freestanding district, with the exception of the open space requirement. Open space required is 46,800 square feet. Open space provided with this application is 33,308 square feet. A little bit of history on this item. This is not the first time this has came forward. On June 21st, 2022, townhome project was presented to the P&Z Commission, and it was tabled. It was then presented again to the Commission on August 16th, 2022. At that meeting, it was denied, and the applicant chose to take it forward to City Council. This is a brand new application. Tonight's submittal is a brand new application. There's a public hearing required for a zoning change. The notice was sent out as required by law, 200 feet perimeter around the site. As of today, Autumn has received a total of 19 emails regarding the request, 17 opposed, 2 for, and I believe she has gave them to Denver. So tonight we're looking at a draft ordinance for consideration. Again, I want to stress this is a request for zoning change only for the property to allow for townhomes. If the zoning is approved, then the next stage would be preliminary plat, preliminary tree mitigation, civil construction plans. This is when city staff and the engineers will review all the mechanics of the project, all drainage, utilities, paving, lot dimensions, so on and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. The commission would then see the plat in that package at a different date after staff gets a chance to review it and bring it forward. So tonight, again, this is just a request to change the zoning on the property. Now, Mr. Broadway has hired a consulting firm to give a presentation. I would recommend receiving the presentation and then opening up the public hearing to let the speakers come in. So I want to introduce Nikki with A&M Moore Consulting, and she's going to provide you with a presentation for this application. Nikki?
Good evening, Commission.
Good evening. Good evening.
It's my pleasure. I am an independent zoning consultant. I specialize in zoning, land planning. I like to work with city governments, look at ordinances, and work with the developers on how to create the best land plan that would bring value to the city, and also work with those neighbors and hearing their concerns about a project. And so with that, next slide, please. Or can I change slides? I can't. Okay. So what I like to do when I present is kind of start with that 10,000 bird's eye view. And so I know the City of Highland Village has been working on an updated comprehensive plan. And in that comprehensive plan, it calls out the need for medium density residential between 4 to 12 dwelling units per acre. While this site is not specifically called out as one of the 5 opportunity areas in that new comprehensive plan draft, it can fill one of those identified needs. And also when I think about a community and a community for a lifetime, it's healthy for a community to offer a diverse range of housing options. What I mean by that, a development community is focused right now on what is the next home buyer looking for? What are residents looking to downsize to? And so I think it's really important, to kind of humanize what that future resident is. And so when I look at a townhome plan, and we'll get into more detail later, I envision this future resident to be a young professional who possibly grew up here, who wants to move back, is not ready to own a large home. They're not ready quite to start their family, but they want to purchase something and they want to live in the community they grew up in. And this would be a really great option for them. Could be a downsizer, someone whose kids have flown the nest and they don't want to keep up with the half-acre lot and the larger home. And so they're looking for something that where they can stay, where their community is, where their church and their friends are, but it's less for them to take care of. And then the next scenario would be a little bit of sadder of a scenario, but someone who had to make the choice to put in a loved one in the assisted living that's right next door, and that they would want to be close by so they could see and visit their spouse or loved one several times a day. My third point would be when you look at compatibility with surrounding uses, and I really like this image up here because when you look at this SF40 kind of lot, you have the school and whatnot, it's a little bit of a hole in the donut, if you will. It's surrounded by single-family homes. There's no real connectivity from the single-family neighborhood to this site or to this school. You appropriately have the planned development commercial and the Walmart and other things located along FM 407. That's where you'd want that, right? Because commercial retail, you're selling eyeballs, per se. And so I really look at this as a great opportunity. This 3.9-acre site nestled between an assisted living community and an elementary school really makes it ideal location for a small-scale housing development. And so what Mr. Broadway with Broadway Builders is we pulled together is a community consisting of 39 single-family luxury townhomes that would be for sale. Each townhome is going to offer, front entry garages, which really allows us to optimize offering private backyard spaces. This is not something you would normally find in a townhome, having the addition of a private backyard of significant space. And then also it allowed us to create a floor plan that has a master down. And so we're gonna jump right into a few more of those details. As staff explained, this is a brand new application. We sat down and we went through, rewatched the last P&Z meetings, listened to all of the neighborhood concerns and whatnot, and really we took that feedback very seriously and made very significant changes to this new application. The biggest difference is there's a 35% reduction in townhomes. So we went from 60 to 39. So our dwelling units per acre really fits right in there with that call for medium density residential at 8.94. We greatly increased the square footage of the home size. So our smallest dwelling size is just a little over 2,200 square feet, which would be very consistent with a size of a single family home. And then in addition to the parking, changing to a front entry garage allowed us to create 2 enclosed off-street spaces inside the garage with an additional 2 off-street spaces in the driveway. So right off the top, we've exceeded the parking of our previous application, which only added up to 150 spaces. And then also meeting code with adding the 10 additional guest parking spaces scattered program throughout the community. In terms of open space, as Scott mentioned, we are providing 33,308 common space provided. We have another additional 23,350 square feet of private space in those backyards. So in total of pervious coverage, we are offering 56,000 square feet. And just to kind of add to that continuity, we're only doing a 4-foot height iron fence in between those backyards so that you get the visual continuity throughout the development. And all of those yards would be maintained by the HOA so that you have a consistent and well-managed, manicured look. You don't have to worry about your neighbor letting their grass grow about 6 inches tall and you're religiously mowing yours every day of the week. I know that bothers me. Okay, on this site, I want to really focus on just the quality of elevations and the quality of build of this product. let's just start from the top down. We have 12-foot roof pitches. That is over and above and beyond what most residential requirements are. Most residential requirements usually ask for a 612, and it really elevates the look of these townhomes. It's an added cost, but it also really suggests a higher quality build. We're also doing 10-foot ceiling plates on the first and the second story. Notice the brick and stone detailing around the doors and the windows, really highlighting those transparency areas. The carriage style garage doors really add to that front level architecture detailing. These are a beautiful traditional style townhome that will age and stand the test of time. Also here over on this board, Mr. Broadway has brought some examples of the materials. So if you're kind of a touch and feel person and you want to have more of a close-up look, you can have a look at this board over here. Drilling down a little bit further, we're kind of addressing the floor plan features. So this first townhome floor plan is about almost 2,300 square feet, and this one offers the primary bedroom downstairs, while also offering 2 additional bedrooms and a study flex space upstairs that could be a great home office retreat area for the family. Great open concept, kitchen, living, dining. This thoughtful floor plan really maximizes that light downstairs into those living spaces. And then this one is a little bit unique in the terms of it's got 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. All the bedrooms are upstairs. So this would be someone who really loves to entertain and have people over for dinner, because it's offering a great open kitchen, dining, living area with an outdoor patio. And then we programmed that utility upstairs to be with all the living spaces. This is becoming a kind of a national trend. I would tell you that 60% of 2-story homes in America have the master upstairs. I'm personally designing a custom home in Grapevine, and we're programming our master bedroom upstairs so we can be closer to our kids. And so this is a very desirable floor plan of those looking for newer builds at this time. Okay, one item that repeatedly came up during the last submission was just impact to school traffic. And I show this slide to kind of reassure the neighbors that of the minimal impact that 39 townhomes would have during that 7 to 8 a.m. school drop-off hour. Basically, 39 townhomes produce a half a car during those peak hours. So that's 19 and a half cars. So if you break that down by the minute over that hour where you have a lot of school traffic going, you're really adding 1 car trip every 3 minutes. And I would say that's kind of worst case scenario, because your hope is that possibly these students are walking to school as well because they have the close proximity. And so I know that there was a previous traffic study performed by the city that didn't warrant a light right there, and that FM 407 still had capacity for 10,000 cars. And and lastly, I understand that in some of the conversations we've had with city staff is, Highland Village is, it's reaching a point of being built out. You have a comprehensive plan that really focuses on a lot of parks and trails and that connectivity and serving the residents. I show this slide to kind of show you the potential of, you have the current taxable revenue that's on this site as a single-family home, and then the approximate taxable revenue, assuming that all these townhomes go for a sale price between $515,000 to $550,000 each. So kind of taking that average, we have $21 million in valuation. The only use that would really produce more value on this 4-acre tract infill site would be multifamily, and I don't think this is an appropriate site for that. If you did an office or an administrative use, you could possibly produce about $5 to $7 million in value. So this is kind of in our planning role, what we talk about is the highest and best use. These townhomes are going to be of the same scale of the surrounding neighborhood while also generating valuable revenue for the city. So these year-over-year revenue events, they contribute to that comprehensive plan of building those parks and trails, improving city infrastructure, roads, sewer, water that needs to be redone. And it also goes to pay public safety personnel. I don't know if y'all have been experiencing this lately, but, fire and police transitioning to different departments, to make a better salary and stuff like that. So you have this competitive edge there when you can pay your city employees, and this would definitely help you do that. Another benefit, I think, when we talk about development is just the infrastructure that's also built with private dollars. For example, there's no continuous sidewalk on Barnett Boulevard as you're going toward the school. And so that would be a part of this development plan that would be put in by the developer, but would be an added benefit to those who are walking to and from school, is paying for and implementing that sidewalk, making it easier for everyone involved. So that is kind of the presentation. I think we covered everything and addressed a lot of things. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have going forward.
I think we'll hold questions till after we hear visitor comments. And I know
I'd recommend opening the public.
we'll open now for public comments. And I know I've got 2 back there. As she's making her way up here, I'll remind everybody, when I call your name, you are welcome to speak. You will have 3 minutes. There's a little light on the podium there that'll let you know when your time is up. All righty, Elizabeth Stancy. She wishes to speak in opposition.
Commissioners, we meet again. Elizabeth Stasny here, adjacent property owner at 931 Inverness. My husband would be here today, but he has a broken leg. So this is the 3rd time we're back here again with similar concerns. To summarize, trees, privacy, and drainage. I actually do sincerely appreciate the effort to retain the viable trees along the eastern border and eliminate the walkway that was concerning for us. So I actually genuinely think that the developer is starting to come up with a development that would work for the neighborhood. However, there are still some deficiencies that I really want to point out. The new plan seems to indicate the remaining trees, the viable trees, will be located inside the 20-foot yards assigned to each unit. And there are screech owls and hawks in these trees, including a nest on our fence line with 4 eggs. I have pictures. Their habitats are protected federally by the Fish and Wildlife Act. The trees also provide much needed privacy for us along our fence line, as they're not doing a fence line on there other than a 4-foot iron fence. We would really like to keep or get more trees. And once those units are sold, what provision is there to protect the trees that remain? Because they'll be inside the property, individual properties. Also, as you may recall, we have an existing drainage issue whenever we get a decent rain. Our garage and yard floods for several days. In the P&Z minutes in this very packet from November 15th, Highland Village requires a minimum of, a 40% maximum lot coverage in every other residential area in the city. I quote, "The rationale for having a maximum lot coverage stipulation is to allow for adequate drainage. This development is 85%, which by definition would therefore be inadequate drainage. Why is this being treated any differently?" So I imagine in your situation you might ask, why is this project requesting such a radical departure from existing Highland Village standards? Why was this one development left off the comprehensive plan? Why are city staff continuing to promote this development with no input from the neighbors? Why are key elements of this submission missing, such as elevation plans? And also, how could this development be turned into a benefit to the locals instead of a burden? Why don't we ask them to completely replant that eastern boundary with trees as a conservation and privacy area? Why don't we request investments in city infrastructure for safety? Why don't we meet the lot coverage and other regulations, or provide funding for drainage issues that I can guarantee you are going to happen? And lastly, for the real estate agent on this commission, particularly the one who said he would like to buy several of these units, presumably to rent them out, I hope you have the moral temerity to recuse yourself due to conflict of interest.
Thank you. All right, Cora Bell would like to speak in opposition.
Good evening, Council. Cora Bell, 905 Heather Glen Court. At the June 22 P&Z meeting, Commissioner George stated, table the request until the applicant could acquire a proper traffic study. Has a traffic study conducted by a registered professional engineer using the Institute of Transportation Engineers and standard engineering practices of this region been prepared, signed, and sealed? If not, once again, why are we here tonight? Also, in that same meeting, Commissioner George stated the proposal go through the review where it does and does not meet the city minimums. Has the developer presented this? The Highland Village approved comprehensive plan, the current one, states that it shall be the guide for the development in Highland Village. It is the city manager's duty to ensure compliance and consistency with the comprehensive plan. Has the city manager submitted a report on those proposals' compliance and consistency with the current comprehensive plan? If not, once again, why are we here tonight? Our village, our vision findings showed that 0 residents want any residential component on the properties along Barnett Road. Do you hear me, developer? Do you hear me, consultant? So let's pause. What is 0? 0 is defined as no objects present. Per the findings for this piece of property on Barnett, the options of hotel, townhome, and single family all resulted as 0. Therefore, per the definition of 0 and the findings, the residents in the community clearly stated that they are in strong opposition of hotels, townhomes, single families in this area. So, maybe the consultant should consult with the neighbours, as she mentioned just a few minutes ago. And the consultant also mentioned there's no connectivity. There is a sidewalk that runs into my neighbourhood, onto Briarwick Lane. Therefore, maybe the residents you should consult with them and consider maybe a cul-de-sac, council and developer, with single family and a single number of properties, similar to the rest of Highland Village. I implore you, please listen to who you represent.
Thank you. One thing I didn't forget to mention before, when you come up, if you could state your name and address. Oh, everybody's done it thus far. Next, we got Jimmy Bassinger. I'd like to speak in opposition.
Jimmy Bassinger. I live at 210 Edgewood in Highland Village. I have for 44 years. I've seen a lot of changes in Highland Village. I'm going directly to the comments I have about the development in Barnett. This development really doesn't comply with Highland Village subdivision ordinances. The lots are too narrow. They're only 28 foot wide, with a standard minimum requirement is 35 feet. The platted lots also don't front on any public street. There are no dedicated streets in this development. Speaking of streets, the minimum street width in Highland Village is 30 feet on a 50-foot public right-of-way. There's a 24-foot street, so-called street, in this development, which is much more similar to a fire lane. Speaking of fire lanes, they must be maintained clear at all times, which would preclude delivery drivers stopping in front of the house to deliver a package in a common scenario, so that the street is too narrow to do that. That fire lane would not be clear. And then lastly, the open space requirement from the material provided on the city website and with the agenda and everything is 29% short of the required minimum open space. They came up with a new figure tonight. I don't know where they got that. I don't think the P&Z should be lowering standards that the city has established that compromise safety. The city has developed those standards over a long period of time. We've enjoyed the city the way that it has been in the past. And one other thing, I'm a retired firefighter, and I noticed that there's no mention of any sprinkler systems in this development at all. The close contiguous buildings, I think that would be a requirement that in any type of development like this with contiguous units in one large building. Thank you very much.
John Hensley would like to speak in opposition.
Good evening. I'm John Hinesley. I'm a 912 Inverness Circle, 29-year resident here in Highland Village. I'm objecting to the townhouse proposal, not from an aesthetics or pictorial view. My property does not back up to this particular location. I'd have to kind of strain to the left to even see a proposed 35-foot roof. My argument is twofold. I call it traffic and safety. Again, having lived here for 29 years, anywhere from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., if you try to take a left out of Tartan onto 407 to head out to 35, you're playing Frogger and your life is in danger at any time during that. Exacerbating that is the fact that people have to come up, dropping off their kids, make a U-turn right in front. Then you got people coming from the car wash making a U-turn. Really makes that Tartan, and we've talked about in the past putting a red light there. That's been turned down, and I don't perceive a red light coming up at Barnett either. So these people coming out, I'm a little bit abstract. The 19.5 cars, everybody that knows that any family these days, both of them have jobs. To be able to afford a $538,000 valuation home, and both of them work, and so the 19.5 is a little abstract to me. So what I'm seeing is more cars coming out. They literally will not be able to turn left on 407. They're gonna have to go right, come to the top of the hill at Tartan, and make that U-turn, which again just heightens the problem there. And the other thing that concerns me, as a parent whose kids all went through those schools, and as a grandparent now with young kids, I see 40 units sitting right beside an elementary school, and that concerns me. Particularly if, and I've heard, perhaps my data's wrong, that even the apartments we set up out on the main road originally were townhomes or condos. Those didn't all sell. A lot of those got converted to a leasing type unit. My concern is people, either corporations or realtors or whoever, buying 10 of these units and then leasing them out in 3 months, 6 months, 12-month blocks. And so we don't get the consistent family into these units that we'd like to have, that we've had for this entire time in Highland Village, and the village that we love, the village that we represent and want to keep as a good family place to come and raise your family. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks. William Meek would like to speak in opposition.
Good afternoon. I am William Meek, a former city councilman. I lived in Highland Village since '06. Love it. And it's a nice, quiet city. And I propose we'd like to leave it this way. So, but on Barnett, with a school right down the street, and along the side, my mother was in a rest home there for a while there, so forth. That's a place for other places like that. A doctor office, a rest home, something like that. Not for family properties, so forth. So in addition, 407 is a very busy. I understand there's not going to be a red light there. So coming out from Barnett, back there, if we built those, allowed those 39 units up there, they'd have to come back to 407 and left to right. So if there's not going to be a light there, that should be a no-no. So I don't think this is a good idea. I regret that I know people are looking for houses and so forth, like they'd like to live, and I understand the reason they want to live in Highland Village, because it is a great place to live. And I'm glad I'm here and so forth. But for that reason, I am definitely against the development of that property and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we got Gene Bassinger. Would like to speak in opposition.
I'm Jean Bassinger. I live at 210 Edgewood, and I want to thank y'all. This project has come before y'all before in a different form, and it was much more dense and did not meet our criteria on so many levels and places, and it was not accepted. And so I want to thank you. We see so many times when developers come, they present their project, and of course they want the maximum profit, and so they present a project that they present as the only option for them to make any profit. And that was what this was presented as originally, that I have to have this density, this type of a development, and y'all did not give in to that. And so I thank you. And now we have this, which is way, way better than the original. So thank you. I would say that we have comprehensive plan and all kinds of guidelines. The city pays lots of money, puts in lots of time to develop those guidelines for what we want our city to be. And I would encourage you today and in every other project that y'all evaluate, that you will hold to that standard that makes Highland Village, that protects the citizens of the city, their values, their interests, their property values, so that we can trust that you are watching out for us, because your first loyalty should be to us. I just thank you for that very, very much, and I hope to look forward to that happening in the future. So thank you.
Kari Blaney would like to speak in opposition. All righty. Tamara Thigpen would like to speak in opposition.
I wrote it down, and
Oh.
but not that you could read it.
Oh, I was told you didn't want it read.
Oh, I don't care one way or the other.
Oh,
Like to.
Mr. Chair, you might want to check, you may be at the part of the stack where you've got people who've stated their opposition who don't wish to speak. I think it may be marked on there. If you'll just double check that just to make sure.
thank you. Yes, that is correct. She does not wish to speak. James Feather does not wish to speak, is in opposition. Guy Ferretta does not wish to speak, is in opposition, and that is all we have. I'd like to close public comments.
I filled mine out, and I said I wish to speak.
Was that the one that you called the name and no one came forward?
No,
No?
I'm Patricia Oldham.
Nope, that was not the name he said, for sure.
Yeah? You are here. I don't know how you got stuck in the wrong pile. Thank you. Patricia Oldham.
3 minutes are up, sorry.
Who does wish to speak in opposition.
Hopefully I can read this without my glasses. Good evening, I'm Patricia Oldham. I live at 3405 Sherwood Lane in Highland Village and lived here for the last 12 years. Came from Flower Mound. So delighted to be here. I would like to request that you keep the planning and zoning standards in place that you have already. I'd like to hope that you keep your residents' best interest as a priority and not a developer's financial goals. If you whittle away the planning and zoning ordinances that you have in place, you open the door to the next developer wanting also lowered standards. And I have to ask, where do you draw the line if you continue to say, okay, you can have X, and then the next person comes along and says, the next developer comes along and says, you gave them X, now I want Y. Highland Village is a beautiful town. This complex is high density, and it's next to a school. Quite frankly, I think back when I was young, my husband and I were young professionals, we would not have been able to afford that, let alone the property taxes that we have in this town. And as an empty nester, since I'm in my later 60s, I would not want to live here because it has stairs, and stairs are not something that we ever wanted to do. And many other people in my age range that are empty nesters are the same way. There's limited parking for guests. There's no place really for a dog for you to walk it. People like to have pets. Where is that pet going to eliminate? In the grass in front of Rambling Oaks? The traffic going in and out was going to be a nightmare there. My mother lived at Rambling Oaks for 4 years, and I volunteered there. I was over there today, and getting in and out of there, making a left turn, it's just not going to happen with all of the cars coming in and out. And I saw what this lady said earlier about the half car. I have to question that in terms of the amount of cars going in and out. So I'm here tonight to request that you keep the planning and zoning standards that you have in place, because they're there for a reason, to protect our residents. Thank you.
Did I accidentally miss anybody else? No. I'd like to close public hearing at 7:34.
Do I get a chance to rebut?
We will. We'll
All right, guys.
Okay, so I do have some questions of the developer, and I know that developer probably wants to answer. Are you going to, or is the consultant? Okay, Nikki.
Start with your questions, or?
Sure. So I know this is a zoning request.
Yes.
But in that, I think there are some things that we need to address prior to where we stand. I agree. I think this is I think it's better than what was originally, and I thought the original one was a really nice development, but I think this is a better notch up. Last time, though, when we were here, my main concern were the residents right behind it, and how we addressed that was we had this large retaining wall, it was really tall, and then the trees on top of that. How do we address that now with what's there? I wasn't really sure how that was going to be addressed in this development, because I know that back portion where there was a buffer zone, which I thought was a great idea, is now eliminated in this. So how do we address that connection between this development and the neighbors directly across?
That's a great question. So hopefully, as you recall, the neighbors did not like the buffer because they felt like it was going to be a place for mischief. And so that has been removed. And so in this scenario, you have two residential uses that back up to one another and have 20-foot minimum in depth backyard, if you will. And so that 8-foot fence along their property line, it's actually, it looks brand new. Went out there and kind of looked at it a few days ago, and it's 8 foot. And so that will remain. And so when we talk about the 4-foot height iron fence, I know that was one of the comments made here previously, those are just in between to separate the individual yards of the homeowners. We're not putting a 4-foot iron fence in between those two residential uses. That 8-foot cedar wood fence will remain. And so that's typical. When you share a fence with another single-family home, you share a wood 8-foot, 6 to 8 foot fence. And so we're keeping in line with that typical. You have the buffer from a building setback. You have a 20-foot building setback from the rear property line, and then as well as their setback on their side and the depth of their yard. And so you have upwards of 40 to 50 feet from building to building, which is more than what you'd see sometimes in a typical neighborhood, or even what you would get in a neighborhood side by side.
And what type of lighting are we planning back there? Again, that may be a little
Lighting,
bit
so
early,
you would just have your typical rear porch light on. There wouldn't be any additional, there's not going to be any extra light coming from the homes other than, what you'd see in someone's window if they have their light on in their bedroom, but those trees back there, which we plan on preserving, we're going to have to go through and take inventory and everything that is living and of good health. We're also planning some additional plantings back there. And so, and that's written in this ordinance before you, that the developer is required to do that, and to, if anything is removed, to replant that. And keep those in a healthy, growing condition. All of these yards will be maintained by the HOA, and so while they are on individual property, there will be a little bit extra layer in there in order to preserve those trees. So hopefully that kind of answers this question.
And I believe I read that as part of the ordinance that those trees would remain, period, not try to remain, they would remain.
Right. You're going to go through
Except
and
for
remove
if they
the
were
underbrush and so that, and if they're dead, yes. It's hard to tell right now because they're all dormant, and so when they start budding and everything, you'll be able to get a better idea of what that is.
And then that protection of those trees would be written in the HOA?
It's written in the ordinance, there to remain. And then all of the yards would be maintained by the HOA.
Okay. Okay. And I wrote down some questions as well. And again, I know we're talking about zoning, so this may be a little bit ahead of the game. But one of the concerns was about leasing, buying and leasing. Is there a way that gets put into an HOA or into an amendment or into some type of a covenant that would either prevent that or make that very, very difficult?
Yeah, so you can put different covenants in an HOA. So you can say no short-term leases. It's hard to step over someone's property rights when they own a home. If they choose to, let's say, leave the country and they want to rent out their home because they don't want to sell it to someone for 12 months, there are some state property rights that would be infringing on, but you could definitely write in there that they would not be for like short-term leases or to be a condo regime. There's some area in there in which that could be placed in the language, and I believe that the developer would be open to that because the intent is that they're for sale. So they're individual homes with individual lots. It's not meant to be a rental community. And, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit sometimes to hear folks talk about, a person who might rent a home in your community, but what if they're building a home and they need a place to live? That's what my family's doing right now. I have 4 kids, so we don't fit in an apartment, right? And so we're building our dream home, but we're renting a home, but that doesn't make us any less involved in a community where we're at. We're renting in the community we're building. It's like a foot in the door to get set up, to get your kids in the school and stuff like that. And so, I don't want to characterize a renter as a negative person to a community. They could be a real value in someone who's worked very hard to be in your community. I know that was kind of one of the comments tonight, and it makes me a little bit sad to hear that. I'm in that situation right now, and I tell you, it's a good situation though, and we have great neighbors, and I hope that they think the same way about us too.
Got any more?
No, just the main thing was the separation. I don't know what that answer is. I don't know if I'm satisfied with leaving the cedar fence there and the separation, but we'll continue on with other ones.
So I think that kind of goes hand in hand too with, I think there's a lot of miscommunication out there that we're not meeting the ordinances. We are meeting all of the ordinances. And the only reason why we're not meeting the open space requirement is the open space requirement is tied to a multifamily development, which we're not. And so let's just say we removed all of the fences and all of that open green space becomes open space. We exceed the open space requirement. I just don't think that that's the best use of that space when you have a for-sale product. I think when you have a for-sale product and you're purchasing a home, you have an expectation of having some private backyard space in terms of, you know, fencing to let out your pet to use the bathroom and whatnot. And so, you know, if it really comes down to us meeting the ordinances, and that's the only ordinance right now that we're asking a deviation from, we meet all the rest of them. So in terms of rear setback, the 20 feet, that is meeting the City of Highland Village's plan development ordinance.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I might clarify some of that. If you recall, I think when the case came before the commission the very first time with the first application, we had this issue about overlay versus, you know, standalone freestanding zoning district. As you recall, within the freestanding plan development standards, there's basically 2 or 3 different specific uses. One's patio homes and one's single-family attached, i.e. townhomes. The townhomes standards for freestanding PDs has all of these lesser standards. They're certainly not the same as an SF40. They're not supposed to be. They're for a townhome development. The application and the proposed ordinance, with the exception of the open space percentage requirement, complies with all of the townhome standards for a freestanding plan development district. But because it doesn't meet the technical requirements of the open space for a freestanding district, we had to characterize this as an overlay district because of that variation from the standards. So in effect, all of the standards of an SF40 apply, except to the extent they're modified by the ordinance, and the ordinance tracks all of the townhome standards for a freestanding district, but is not because of the open space issue, if you can follow that. But as far as the townhome standards, it does comply with townhome standards for a freestanding district.
Okay.
My eyes rolled back in my head a little bit there.
And
but,
so
you know,
we can go through
we
those
followed
one by
it.
one, if that would be helpful. If we want to go through all the townhome standards, I could go through that.
Yeah, so when you talk about, I mean, you know, so I think when, you know, there's a little bit of confusion. Does it meet the standards for an SF40? Obviously not. It does not. It varies from the SF40 underlying base standards. Does it comply with what would be the standards for a townhome development if this were a freestanding district? The answer is yes, except for the open space requirement. So if you're, you know, so when you're talking about what do we have in the zoning, you know, the comprehensive zoning ordinance regarding townhomes, that's the set of standards that we have is what's in this ordinance, except for the open space. And the open space is reduced by that roughly 20-25% of what, and she's correct. The way even in the freestanding district, the open space requirement refers to the requirements for a multifamily development, i.e. apartments. And so to the extent that they're requesting a difference because these are not apartments, you know, that's their justification for the request for going with a lesser percentage of the open space because these are townhomes and not apartments. Right. But they do have the dedicated backyards for each of the units.
And apartments don't have yards.
As their justification for that differential. And she's correct. That's one thing when Autumn was, when staff was reviewing the application, it would meet those percentages if you counted those spaces, but because the open space requirement requires usable open space. Usable open space means it's open to everybody in the development. Well, obviously the backyards, private backyards, the townhomes aren't. We you know, from a staff standpoint, can't count the backyards, but if you were to count them, they'd actually meet even the open space standards.
All right. Anybody have any questions on that?
Who's your market?
Who's the market?
Yeah, who would these be marketed to? I mean, obviously, we've been given the price, which is higher than what the original development package was.
So we increased the square footages, and so we expect, based on area comps in the Flower Mound and Highland, there's not a lot of townhomes in Highland Village, obviously, and so using kind of the surrounding area, Louisville, Flower Mound, et cetera, we think it'd go anywhere from, $230, $250 a square foot, and so we have increased the square footage of these homes, and so, of course, you therefore increase the price. It is not unheard of these days in this kind of housing market, with housing being as scarce as it is, for townhomes to be $500,000. That is, so that is the market. I mean, I guess who would ever make that payment? That would be 30% of their income. You know what I mean? So we really do feel like you're going to attract the young professionals, those who want to downsize but still stay close to their friends and family. But they don't want a huge yard to maintain or a huge house to maintain anymore. This could be, I hate using this example sometimes, but it's a real one. Someone we call in the penalty box. So maybe a spouse who is getting a divorce and they didn't get the house, but they want to live close to their kids and their kids' school and all their activities, and they need a place to live that they also can provide their kids a bedroom that's not an apartment as well. So there's definitely a market out there for this. There's no hesitation or qualms that will be able to be sold.
Is there a breakdown for the 39 townhomes? How many of them are going to be 2-bedroom, et cetera, in the packet?
Yeah, so all of them are 3 bedrooms.
All of them are 3?
All of them are 3 bedrooms. 60% of them have the master down. And I think there was one exhibit where it had like different colors for the different floor plans.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
So 60% of them would be where the master's down, and it's a 3.5 bath.
Yes. Yes. So you still have that half bath downstairs for guests and whatnot.
Versus the 2.5 bath.
Do you have any data on the average length of time someone owns a townhome?
Oh my goodness. I do not have that data handy. If that's something that you need, we can definitely pull that. I think that's difficult in terms of, what location, how far, like whatever radius you want to look at. Do you want to look at it from a national, from a state-based, et cetera? But, I would say, I'm working on my 3rd home I've owned in my lifetime already. I would say that there's definitely a transition that, we do 30-year mortgages, but I wouldn't say that people are much more transit in general in nature now. And so you would probably get anywhere between 5 and 10 years in a townhome, depending on their life stage, but it could be longer.
The reason I ask is that I think young families who want the master bedroom upstairs while their kids are young will have a drastically different opinion once they turn teenagers.
Possibly, but I would say that DFW is in the minority of having master bedrooms downstairs across the nation. It is more typical to have all of your bedrooms on a different floor. DFW is unique. Texas is unique to that because we've always had the land to build wider, bigger homes, and so it naturally transitioned to having a master down. But I would tell you that that's not always the case, across the nation. And then I feel like here, being 60-40, that's a nice split to make sure that you're meeting the market on both ends of where they would like to do that. And afterwards, I'm willing to tell you all my reasons I want the master up, so we can have a sidebar conversation.
Yeah, we should. Strong fences make for strong neighbors. Are you really comfortable with a 4-foot wrought iron fence between these units?
I think we are in terms of creating that community. If that becomes, I think what we were trying to do is capture that open space feel to make sure that the community didn't feel cramped, it felt open, it felt inviting. If it really came down to it and the commission wanted to make a recommendation that those not be 4 foot, I believe that the developer would be amenable to that. But we feel really, really good about offering that.
Is there any option for the buyers to erect a solid fence between the units?
It would not, because this would be written in this ordinance, and this ordinance would carry on with the development and forever. And so that would not be an option unless they wanted to come up before you and ask for a variance. So this is the time to probably iron that out and to figure out what we want this neighborhood to look like.
Okay. Is there going to be any option for those buyers who don't have a patio on their home to build a patio in the backyard?
I don't believe so, because they would have to meet the requirements of lot coverage and any kind of, lot coverage we have plenty of room on, because we can address that in a minute, but then also to any kind of setback requirement. So it would depend on what that would be. If it would just be additional concrete if they wanted to add a patio, but these are programmed to have covered patios on the back end of them as well.
Not all of your units.
Okay, yes, you could add concrete. There will be some kind of concrete pad. Is that what you're asking for in terms of patio? I'm not really sure. I don't know if you're asking for a structure or if you're asking for just additional concrete.
Just asking if a buyer wanted to create a patio in their backyard where there is not one built into the home, whether or not that was going to be an option.
Yes, they would be able to, yes. They just have to pull a building permit like anyone else. In terms of lot coverage, because that's kind of come up, is the plan development standards that are written in Highland Village allow for a maximum of 85%. If we look at each individual lot, because they will be platted as each individual lot, we only have a 59% max lot coverage, and so that's significantly lower than what is allowed by the Highland Village's ordinances.
Did I read somewhere that there would be some type of playground or open area? Or did I dream that?
So there is no playground. That's not programmed into it. There is an open space.
Yeah.
So like right through here from Barnett, this is going to be kind of like a private sidewalk, kind of open area, just to provide connectivity throughout the development. The idea is that we have some masonry columns here, have like maybe some lamp post lights, and just to kind of make this really nice walkable community. I don't know about y'all, but I know my kids routinely ride their bikes down to the elementary school playground anyways, and that's what they end up playing on the most, because it's the biggest and has the baddest slides. And so I would say, this doesn't necessarily program toward having a tot lot in it, but we have open space and sidewalk connectivity throughout.
We ran into an issue in the past in this town when townhomes were brought before us. They were approved, and as been discussed tonight, they ended up becoming apartments because they couldn't sell. I don't think that people are so much against a rental unit as much as they are against apartments.
Sure.
Apartment dwellings, because they tend to have a lot more transient lifestyle. How is that going to be addressed where these are they are single-family homes. They're not going to become a multifamily unit down the road like we have unfortunately seen in the past.
Yeah, so multifamily units were, I guess I'd have to understand what those townhomes were. Were they all platted on individual lots? Were they platted on one lot? Did you have one investor come in and buy the whole regime? I think I need a little bit more information so I make sure I'm comparing apples to apples. These are platted on individual lots and they're intended for sale. I don't, with the way the market is driving housing right now, I don't see the benefit of scrapping a for-sale product to move to a rental, especially when you don't have an ongoing property management company to manage them. Mr. Broadway he's a builder. He's in construction. He's not in ongoing property management. And so the idea is to sell these. And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, because we talked about the phasing of this, that we would have so many that would be for sale before we pull the building permits in the next one. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then we also talked over here just a few moments ago about maybe adding in some covenants into the HOA about short-term rentals and whatnot. A 12-month lease would be a minimum, those types of things through the HOA.
Okay, but that doesn't alleviate, I mean, I understand he's in the business to make money, and you know, that's why we all work.
Sure.
To
I don't think this is a money conversation. I think you're concerned about them not selling.
Or somebody comes in, there are those hedge funds that will come in and have millions of dollars and say, I want all 39 units. And I could understand why, if I owned all 39 and be like, I can sell all these at once, well, why wouldn't I?
Okay.
And so that hedge fund is not going to buy them to resell them. That hedge fund would buy them to rent them out. So how does something like that get remedied?
I guess I'd have to look at your legal counsel.
I will tell you that the ability of a city to regulate whether you can rent versus, require that they all be owner purchased, we can't do it.
Okay.
We just can't. There's some significant property rights there regarding that. We have talked from time to time with City Council about short-term rental ordinances as a possibility with respect to short-term rentals, turning these into short-term rentals for investment, or these are any home. I mean, whether it be townhomes, whether it be anything along the lakeshore. To date, as we've revisited that question probably annually for the last 3 years, there just hasn't been enough short-term rentals even listed that we could find in Highland Village that we could even afford the administrative cost for a permitting fee to cover the administrative cost, because there's just not enough of it actually happening right now. And we've shared that with City Council, like I said, probably annually for the last 3 years. So as a general rule, the way developers typically do now is they will place in their covenants a requirement that any leases have to be a minimum of 6 months to a year, if they're actually going to rent the property. Again, that's not something the city typically enforces, but it is something that a developer will place in their covenants to ensure other owner-occupied residents that they're not going to be turning them, it's not going to turn into a rental community of short-term rental for apartments. But again, that's usually developer-driven with respect to, and I've not seen it in any townhomes, but it can be in a townhome set of covenants. We will be reviewing the covenants. They have to approve. Of course, we've got a set of requirements that the covenants must comply with that are in the ordinance. The covenants will have a provision that requires the city to have kind of a third-party beneficiary enforcement ability primarily over the insurance of the maintenance of the common areas, the open spaces, and other types of things. So, for example, if it was, and that assessments be, charged to the residents to pay for that maintenance, for the common area maintenance. One thing we haven't discussed yet, and this will really probably come up at the time of platting, would be, because I know there's been some questions about what do you do with this drive area that connects all the homes internally, who maintains that? Well, if it's not a public street, it's going to we're probably going to require it be platted as a common area that'll be owned by the HOA, that'll have to be maintained by the HOA through assessments to the homeowners. Is how we'll probably end up addressing that.
And I'm not sure where things are at the state as far as HOAs go, but they can restrict the maximum percentage of ownership as rentals. I've dealt with it in the past on other.
I'm sorry, did you say they can or can't?
Can. They can put that into the HOA documents to restrict the maximum number of rentals at a certain percentage.
We can look at some language to add that. The developer's amenable to that and to giving the city that kind of protection.
Okay.
Yeah, what would stop a hedge fund from buying 39 homes that are doing the same thing?
So those sidewalks are private right? Same with the fire lane. It's the sidewalks.
Well, the internal sidewalks, internal walk areas will be private, part of the common area maintenance that'll be required by the HOA. There still is going to be the sidewalk that's constructed along Barnett. That'll be a city sidewalk.
It is as proposed here, or it will?
Yeah, it'll be part of the construction, because there's also a portion of the property has to be, because of just how some of the title and property lines are messed up in that whole area that have, over the last 10 years, have been slowly, as properties develop, slowly resolving themselves. One of those issues is the right-of-way, the width of the right-of-way along Barnett itself. So part of the platting for this property will include, actually dedicating what's already being used as right-of-way for Barnett, as it is. So so part of that will be inclusive of that public sidewalk along Barnett.
So are these streets going to be private streets? They're not going to be city maintained?
Correct. It'll probably have to be platted as a public access. It'll probably, my guess is part of that's when we plat it, it'll be a public access utility easement and fire lane. So that we can get, so that the public can access it through it across the board. It'll be kind of and it'll have to be a mutual access within the lots themselves in order for the property owners to get through there. So, and to
Ongoing maintenance.
circulate through the development. But it is correct, it won't be a full-blown public street.
So are the streets wide enough to accept emergency vehicles?
Yes. They meet all the turn radiuses and all the fire lane requirements.
What we may have to discuss is on-street parking, and we may have to do something along those lines so that there's, we'll have to review that at the platting stage with respect to on-street parking, the ability to do on-street parking, because there is only a 24-foot width. Effectively, if it's a fire lane, it's going to be difficult. It may almost be prohibited as a fire lane to do any on-street parking because of the fact it'll be a fire lane. So parking will be basically prohibited, which is why the additional 10 spaces for visitor parking are being proposed, in addition to the full length, because a lot of townhome developments don't have the full length 20-foot driveway. They're proposing that for this one. Paul, the prior application for this property was requested that on-street parallel parking be constructed as a means of counting the required additional parking for this property. That is not part of this application.
And then what was submitted was a concept plan, right?
A plan development concept plan, yes, sir.
Okay. I got a few questions, just because I wanted to make sure that the applications for establishment of a plan development, specifically an overlay, not a freestanding. I was just reading, I have some concerns as well about drainage, some other things, and I was reading the submittal requirements for concept plan. Looks like there's some things missing, like number 5, topography at a 10-foot interval or less. In C, I can start reading down, and there's maybe, like, I think somebody had asked on some HOA, a general description of any homeowners or owner association requirements or covenants to be opposed by the property. I don't see that in the conceptual plan. And again, I'm just reading what we have in our ordinances.
So all of those were in one of the draft packets that Autumn sent me. The topography, there's about a 10-foot fall. That exhibit was in there in one of the drafts that she sent me. Do you want to speak to that, Scott?
Can you point that out, please?
I believe she shared the draft ordinance with you, which has all that information.
Well, and I might say the draft ordinance does not, draft ordinance itself does not have the topography, but the application itself did. We did not include that as part of the draft ordinance. We typically don't, but we can if you request we do so. As far as some of the other items, and I'm aware that you've been provided a list of items from a local citizen, because I've received that same document. And I know that's where, I suspect that's where some of these things, the questions are coming from. That, you know, as far as the topography, like I said, that was part of the application. Autumn and I discussed that this morning. That's why we provided it to you all in the packet this evening, to make sure that you had that. Again, we've typically and historically, of course, we've probably done 4 PDs over the last 10 years, so just recognize we haven't done that many. Some of the other issues we believe are covered. You know, there's an extensive section regarding the HOA covenants that's actually in the ordinance itself. That describes what's going to be required as part of the HOA requirements.
Is it in the conceptual?
Yeah.
The concept plan?
Yeah, it's not. The only other thing that may be actually missing might be the text of either drawings or a narrative of what of how utilities are going to be provided to the development. We can certainly, as a condition of going forward, should the commission decide to recommend approval, one of those conditions would be that the concept plan add a text explanation or narrative of how utilities would be provided to the property. I think Mr. Christian could probably advise you. Utilities are already at the property, so it's really going to be a matter of extending, because there's really not going to be any extensions to the property. I believe they're going to be required.
There's adequate utilities to the site, and then all that, utilities, drainage, paving is all reviewed by staff at the plating phase.
Scott, while you're up here, remind me, because I know in one of our meetings, and it wasn't with this development, but we did have some information on the traffic study that was done. And I can't remember if it was either in our, from McAdams in our comp plan, or if it was maybe the apartment that were being proposed. Yeah. And if I remember, that traffic study by that traffic engineer stated that 407 and Long Prairie basically had, I want to say like 10,000 cars of
the capacity for FM 407 has approximately 10,000 plus additional.
Was that what I remember? Okay, I remember that correctly.
Cars a day before it's at full capacity. Okay. And that was, there was a TIA performed for the town of Flower Mound, which, you know, the 407 is a dividing line for the two municipalities. So I don't have their data, but I do talk to my counterparts over there. So they did a TIA for a proposal they had over there, and some data came out of that. And then the TxDOT data is readily available to mine on the internet, which is where we got some of that. And then the city requested TxDOT to do a traffic signal warrant study for the intersection of FM 407 and Barnett, and they did that on October 5th, 2022, and a signal did not warrant in the area. Now, Mr. Broadway did have an engineering firm perform a TIA, which you saw the data tonight for his development. So.
Okay. And again, one other thing I would like to ask is, as far as that, going back to that back fence, would the developer be amenable to going back and putting something more substantial there besides a wrought iron fence, also to help with the drainage than what's there to move forward?
So drainage will be decided during engineering design, and we will meet the City of Highland Village design criteria in terms of that. In terms of fencing, I think we're open to that. So the wrought iron fencing would just be to separate the individual yards for the townhomes. And so when you already have an 8-foot wood fence that would share, that's on the property line, I would like to ask, what else would you want? Are you asking for more height?
I'm asking for a little bit more substantial built deviation and a little bit more height.
Okay.
Then the
The
8-foot.
8-foot cedar fence?
8-foot cedar fence is the highest standard y'all allow in the City of Highland
Well,
Village.
and again, I'm going back to our original thought.
Okay.
Because it was much higher in our original plan. When we had that buffer zone back there, it was.
The retaining wall.
It was a high retaining wall.
Yeah, so I think when we've gotten into more drainage, and we don't have a civil engineer here, I'm not going to speak to that, but lowering the site, I don't believe would help the drainage issues that maybe some of the neighbors are talking about. And so I think we need to address that at the engineering design phase today. And so if what the neighbors are asking for, if they would like to see, we can go and double that fence. So right now, it's just a single board-on-board cedar 8-foot fence. If we would like to go in and kind of do those board-on-board and add an additional layer to increase the privacy, I think that the developer would be open to that. That would kind of add some more thickness, a little bit more privacy, so you can't see through the cracks, if you will. I don't think it can be any higher for Highland Village's code. 8 foot is the maximum between single-family uses, and I don't think it would be beneficial to, I don't really know what's being asked. And so if there's something specific that we need to do, I think lowering the site and putting in a retaining wall is something that needs to be determined at engineering design phase.
So in the original concept, it was there. And I know this concept doesn't have it, but originally we thought it was a good idea to put it there. Obviously, you wouldn't have put it there if it wasn't. So what part has changed? It's still the same site. It's still the same levels. What's changed?
So I think when you have to, and this is a business decision, importing and exporting dirt adds additional costs to development. And so when you don't have a specific engineering design reason to do that, it's not really called for. You're better off using the grade that you have currently and balancing your site. And so when we've reduced the density and reduced the townhomes by 21 townhomes. And so in order to kind of make up that difference in development costs and yields, there's no longer room in the budget to still deliver a quality product and then arbitrarily lower or raise the site based on no engineering design standard. And so I think the idea of that was to lower it, create this pathway and walkway. Well, now we have private backyards. You don't want to lower the private backyards below the homes. You would end up with a swampy backyard, and I don't think that's desirable to a homeowner who wants to be able to utilize their backyard. And so when you have it kind of as a standalone retaining wall, walking path is one thing when it's lowered, but now this is someone's backyard, and you don't want it to be able to hold water right there. If you lowered the site. That just would not be feasible with the way the site plan is laid out now.
I think the other is those buildings change direction.
They changed directions as well.
It was the side of the building that
Yes,
was
they were
there,
facing in.
And now we've got a backyard.
Yes, and so a lot of that has to do with that. So now you want to use this space as a private backyard. You don't want to lower that from the rest of the site.
Yeah, and I'm not saying lower it. What I'm saying is, to me, there needs to be a substantial separation between this development and the existing development. An 8-foot cedar fence doesn't seem like that accomplishes it. Now, again, I know there's trees out there, and that will help. And it's for me, it's more about that visual between what's there now and the privacy that they're afforded and what's being suggested. We can address the privacy issue.
Okay.
Then I think that's where I'll go with. Now, is that higher? Is that thicker? Whatever it is.
So from a privacy standpoint, we are building to the same scale as the homes that are currently there. And you have a significant setback from building to building to ensure privacy. No one's looking over into someone else's backyard. If we wanted to go in there and put up a masonry fence, if you wanted something thicker and substantial, you're going to lose trees because you're going to have to dig under that earth to actually put the footing in for those, for the concrete columns and the brick columns. And so you're at risk of losing trees. Now, we can feasibly add another layer of wood fence, 8 foot, match it without interrupting the neighbors. That would add to thickness. It would cover any cracks. We can also, if the neighbors are amenable, put a cap on that so it looks really nice. You have board-on-board cedar fence with a cap. Looks very, very nice, very substantial. And we can do that without disrupting the trees and possibly potentially killing them. Would that be amenable?
Yes, I think that would be,
Okay.
Aesthetically, I think that would be much better than what's there.
I think I got a thumbs up.
Just so I didn't miss something here, did you guys get this in the original packet?
No.
Okay. We didn't get the conceptual plan till tonight. If this is the concept.
So this is the PD
No.
concept.
This is the application.
This is
Yeah, that's the
technically just
conceptual
PD
plan.
concept plan. This one.
Okay. In these.
On the proposed ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Jared, what
this
you
is the
have is, you have a copy of an application, which is
Application.
not typically given to the commission. However, in an effort to be transparent, Autumn supplied the application to you tonight on the dais for your review.
Okay. It's very helpful, by the way.
Gotten it earlier.
So staff has reviewed what's been proposed, is my understanding, and they've made a recommendation that we either forward a recommendation to City Council based on what's been presented.
Right, as historically, staff does not make a recommendation to, recommendation to you to recommend denial or approval. We just recommend that you make a recommendation.
Right. That we do something.
All right, anybody got any questions? Y'all
I have some comments.
shoot.
So I think it was, I don't fault the developer I think it's a very beautiful development, but for me, I think there are several yellow flags. The first one being absolutely no way to police the purchase and leasing of the townhomes, if they in fact remain townhomes, like we've already seen. Which in turn, its proximity to the school, the elementary school, causes me concern in terms of, if we start having, people that are more transient than not. I also think the 550 price point, especially now in the housing market, I think that's going to be tough to achieve, and I think we may have to revisit, how they're going to sell off the lots like we already had with the development across from Briar Hill. And so, I'm not a voting member tonight, but, that's just my opinion.
I would say that comment-wise, this is, it's a really nice development for what's been presented. We were presented with an abundance of townhomes. We asked that those be reduced. The developers come back with a plan that reduces those significantly. I still, obviously there's still some things that we need to work out. My big issue about the screening and things like that. But overall, I think that's a well put together plan and a nice building. Now, again, I can't argue about price points and things like that. I'm not sure about those type of things. I do think we can and should address some of those issues in the HOA, which, again, if I'm not mistaken, is the next step, correct? To nail down HOA issues and plating issues and drainage issues, those type of things.
Right, those all come at the planning stage, that's correct.
But I think those are concerns that we should have.
Got a question for the attorney. We've been discussing here the HOA, and one of the things that can be done with an HOA, the members of the HOA can vote and change the HOA further down the road. So
Actually, they can't. When it comes to, because the way the ordinance is written and the way the covenants have to be written in order to comply with the ordinance, is they have to come to the city to request any amendments that would remove the ability to do assessments, that would reduce the responsibility for maintaining the common areas, that would even go so far as to dissolve the association itself. None of that can be effective without city council approval. So it would require the city to, and the city has the ability to go in, charge the HOA if the city ends up having to go pay the maintenance. That would be in the covenants, and the city has the enforcement provision, we'll have the enforcement provision in the covenants to do that.
Okay.
That's how we deal with that issue.
Gotcha.
And the other, as far as property rights, there's nothing that prohibits anyone from leasing to who may not be the best candidate for someone near the elementary school. It doesn't matter if it's townhome or a single-family residence. We try to do background checks, and it's been pointed out, obviously, that I am in the real estate industry as well as several other people on the council here. So when you get into property rights, who owns the property currently? Okay, so when you start restricting property rights, it gets into some pretty slippery slopes. Townhomes similar to this are right now $592,000 is the least expensive property in Highland Village that's on the market. So these are a very needed item in our ecosystem for a healthy city, and that does include when you start looking at tax dollars. This is going to be something that brings in much more revenue long term, which I think is important to consider when we're talking about best use. And when you talk about being able to restrict at the HOA, and again, this is at a state level that they're dealing with HOAs right now. There is the possibility of being able to write that into the HOA covenants to restrict the amount of leasing. From a realtor perspective.
Any more comments?
I'm certainly not in the business of, taking people's rights away, because I think, like she stated, that's not something they can even regulate, right? And so it's inevitable.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend adoption of the ordinance as submitted to the City Council.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Before we do, can we add those things that we were talking about to that motion? That if it moves forward, it needs to include topography, it needs to have the conceptual plan, needs to add the explanation of utilities, and then that a study of that screening would occur. Can we do that? Because I think if we move forward, am I correct in stating that if we make a motion to recommend approval to the City Council with these stipulations, if that's what we wanted to do?
Yes, you can. Yes, you could do that. At this point, a motion have to be made to go as presented. It would either have to be done as presented as a formal amendment, or those making the motion and seconding the original motion can accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Because our options are accept, modified, or reject. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Essentially, yes.
I mean,
But we could.
are those needed right now? Because we are just talking about zoning.
Well,
At this point.
I think
don't know.
just for clarification, I think what the Commissioner's reflecting are a couple of things that may have been pointed out by a citizen as possible deficiencies in the concept plan as it's attached to the ordinance. I don't think from a city attorney standpoint, I don't think from a staff standpoint, as far as those two items, mainly adding the topographic exhibit and the text, the narrative regarding utility, how the utilities be provided, I don't think, that's certainly not objectionable to staff. And I don't have a problem seeing those as part of the motion. The only issue I have about, I just want to make sure on the screening that if that is a motion, part of the motion that goes forward, because I'm going to have to revise the ordinance between this meeting and the council meeting when this is considered, is what we're talking about is adding essentially the 8-foot wood screening on the property side of the existing 8-foot fence. The only concern I have about requiring the cap is because to put the cap might require consent of the neighbors, and it wouldn't necessarily require the consent of, to put the slats on the one side, but it might on, to put the cap. So I think with the consent, I might want to suggest that that be required subject to the consent of the adjoining property owner.
All right, since we had a second,
In which case it would have to be all or none.
Yeah.
May I have a point of order for a clarifying statement? Interesting, okay.
So since we seconded, we got to vote that down before we can add this back in, right?
I'm fine with either way, yeah.
I'm sorry, the public hearing is closed. I mean, if the chairman wants to reopen the public hearing, he can certainly do.
Well, it was a statement made by one of the commissioners. I want to clarify what he said.
Okay, I think at this point, I think it's up to the chair and the board.
Yeah, now the public hearing, I'm sorry, the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Is that with the stipulations or with the additions?
Yeah, where are we?
Yeah.
We were without.
We're voting on the motions without the stipulations.
Yes.
Okay.
So all in favor?
Discussion, or did we already discuss?
I thought we already discussed. Do we want to discuss some more?
Well, from what I'm understanding is if we vote without these stipulations could be, they won't be part of the ordinance.
They won't be part of the ordinance going forward to council. That's
Okay,
correct.
I think they need to be part of the order. Okay.
All right.
That's what I want to understand.
So the option is either request, make a motion for a formal amendment to add them, or have those who made the motion and seconded it add them as part of the motion as a friendly amendment.
Okay, and Steve, I don't know if you were willing to do that, or if we just vote on what you...
I am amenable to adding those
adding those
stipulations.
stipulations, which are adding to the conceptual plan, explanation of utilities, and we get them there, which are adding the topography information to the ordinance, and to provide a 8-foot board-on-board fence with a cap if amenable to...
Unanimous approval of the adjoining property.
Okay.
That's probably how I'll write.
My exact words. So with those stipulations. Okay. And you still want a second?
Yes.
Okay.
With all of that was
Okay, very good.
said.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
It carries 2 to 4, 3.
3.
Yeah.
Okay.
All righty. On to the next item. Status report on various projects for the future P&Z.
Scott, are you doing that?
Autumn is absent, and I have no report. has just been informed the next meeting is proposed for March 21st.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All righty. Meeting is now adjourned at 8:35.